How you first kind of got in touch with his organization, or certainly his campaign, and what drew you to want to work for him.
Well, thank you for having me, Anthony. I lived in a vortex of misinformation, of gaslighting, of division and fear mongering, otherwise known as Fox News. And I lived in that vortex increasingly, beginning in the beginning of Obama's administration and just getting sucked deeper and deeper in through those 8 years. And so when 2016 came around, I saw Donald Trump as a political outsider, which I think is one of the largest cons that he's perpetuated, because he lived and breathed politics his whole life. This is how this man survived, by sheer will, and using the system in the way that we hate politicians to use the system. So he's actually the ultimate political insider. But of course,
that is amazing to hear from someone who's an insider who worked with Trump, and from the conservative side. What she just stated is exactly my assessment as an outsider, just doing analysis of, looking at things that Trump has said and done and his track record pattern of behavior. And I, a long time ago, years ago, realized that Donald Trump is quite the opposite of the man that he plays on TV, the character he plays on TV. This idea of Trump being an outsider, Donald Trump is so establishment, he is so not an outsider. And the thing about it, what he actually is, he's very, very effective at manipulating people. That's something he's had decades of experience doing. So the man knows what he's doing. He knows how to tap into your emotions and to use them against you. And that is what he's really, really good at, right? And he utilized that great skill that he has, that he's developed for so long, that even in his old age, where clearly, like Biden, he's not all there anymore. But he's like a world chess champion. Even as they get really old and they're not really thinking so straight, there's like a muscle memory. You've been doing it for so long that even as a mentally compromised, world chess champion, you can utterly destroy the average chess player just based on, again, you've been doing it for so long. That's Trump, right? This manipulation, this knowing how to. It's almost like if you look at like X-Men, or you get into those sort of sci-fi characters where you have someone that has the ability to, in a way, exploit your powers, right? I forgot who I'm thinking about. There's several characters that do these things where, let's say your power is you have a laser beam. They will figure that out and they'll take that from you and use it against you. They will develop their own laser beam and fire it back at you. Your power is super strength, right? They can read that, process it, and replicate it and use that same super strength against you. This is what Trump does, right? Trump himself admitted, even during his campaign, but of course people don't see Trump as who he is. They see the character he plays on TV. But if you look at what Trump actually said, he talked about how for years he's been paying off politicians to get them to do what he wants them to do, right? So he's been part of the swamp. That's the swamp. What's the swamp? Politicians bought and paid for by the elites and the 1%. Trump is one of those billionaires that was buying off politicians to have those politicians betray us. That's the swamp, right? Trump is the swamp, paying off politicians to get deals so he can line his pockets with cold hard cash, having the politicians work for him instead of working for the people. Trump represents the reason why our politicians are so corrupt, because they serve people like Trump. But he plays this part of political outsider. I'm not a politician. Trump is the wolf, right? The chickens are afraid of the wolves coming inside. And Trump is one of those wolves, right? Normally what happens is the wolves work with certain insiders to open the door and let them get inside and get at the chickens or whatever, right? But Trump is one of the actual wolves, and by electing him, we put the wolf in the henhouse, right? So your chickens worried about the wolves getting you. So what do? You put an actual wolf in the henhouse. So now instead of him having to buy off people, he's inside. You let the very enemy against the people that you fear trick you into thinking that he's an outsider that's going to help you. But all you did is you let him inside. One of these corrupt billionaires who've been buying politicians.
I bought into the con. I bought into the facade of him being a political outsider, and having been someone who followed politics, but also liked to consider myself kind of very independent and even a rebel in certain respects. I saw him, like a lot of people did, kind of the way some people have viewed Boris Johnson in the UK as this renegade outsider who was going to bring about change that others were not willing to for the good of the people.
I want you guys to recognize this is not a Trump thing. I think it's very important that we, the people, need to recognize the common scams that politicians and elites use to control and take advantage of us. Because they're not very clever. They've been using the same scams over and over again for decades and decades, and for some reason we don't get it. Pretending to be an outsider while actually being an insider this has been done for a very long time. It's just like this whole talk about mail-in ballots being fraudulent. That's a scam that, if I'm not mistaken, the Democrats pulled, right? The political party that is disadvantaged by mail-in ballots will always make claims that it's somehow fraudulent. So Trump, again, this wasn't his plan. This is it's a classic American political scam, right? This has been around for decades, right? Beware of politicians who present themselves as an outsider. If you see somebody that you recognize yourself as an outsider, that's a little different. But if they are selling themselves as a political outsider, you should be skeptical. Politicians will say whatever it takes to get your votes to get in power. Just like how you should be skeptical of that used car salesman who's telling you all kind of mumbo jumbo. You need to be the same way about anyone who's running for president, running to be a senator, representative, whatever it is. You need to be skeptical. I think Americans, for some reason, can be so gullible. We look for people to say the things that we like to hear. So if I want to run for office and I start saying things like, I'm going to drain the swamp and it's time that we, the people, get represented and have our voices heard, right? I know that there are millions of Americans who will connect with this and they'll be like, yes, this is what we need. Those are just words, though. Just because I'm running for office and I'm saying these things and you're like, yes, these guys are selling you something, right? Trump was selling something. Biden was selling something. Obama was selling something. George Bush was selling something. Pay attention less to what they're saying and look at what they're doing and what they have done, what the track record is. Don't let them manipulate you.
So pretty early on, probably late 2015, I accepted that this man was flawed because I thought that he was authentic. And you know what, Anthony, I think these are the two biggest cons that he still gets away with: political outsider and authentic. So I believe that he was authentic. Another totally false notion. This man just lives and breathes lies. He can't speak a truth to save his life. So
let me tell you how the cult of personality works. Like, there's a lot of cult behavior going on here, and you should recognize it. So if you're caught up, then you're going to think to yourself, you're not going to listen to the substance of what she's saying. You're going to look for ways that you can discredit her as a person because what she's saying is uncomfortable to you. So something your brain will probably come up and present to you, because your brain is trying to protect you, right? Is the idea that she's just looking for a career as some kind of never Trumper. Like, she's a rhino, she's not a real conservative, and now she's just looking to make money and get her name out there and get famous as a never Trumper. Now, why she would choose to do that versus getting her name out there by staying loyal to Trump, I mean, you explain that one. there's a lot of energy on the Trump side, Republican side, not so much on the left. So it really wouldn't make sense for her to betray Trump looking for fame. I mean, she was so famous, she was in the White House with a pretty good role working for President Trump, right? Trump has a decent chance of being president again. So how again does this make sense for her to go the Never Trumper route, to be part of a movement that is subservient to the Trump movement? Yeah, I just said that aloud.
During that experience, blamed it on Trump himself, because my personal interactions with the man were fairly positive. He actually, in retrospect, he said some very misogynist things to me. But at the time, I found him relatively respectful and very appreciative of my work. So I was reluctant to hold him personally responsible.
So what she's saying there is not surprising to me. I think potentially if I worked for Ben Shapiro, Steven Crowder, if I had worked for Donald Trump, I would probably have a very different experience from what other people are. If I was kind of naive and not recognizing what's going on, and I just focused on the dynamic of the sort of working relationship, I would probably have positive things to say. Because Trump is very, like I said, very, very good at manipulating people. So I could see him, telling you what you want to hear and you're doing great work, blah, 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 blah. Just really, really grooming you. Now, that's, of course, as long as I'm doing what he wants me to do. The second he has any suspicion that I am not Team Trump, then I get to see the real Trump, right? So I'm not really surprised at what she's saying. And it's interesting, in retrospect, she recognizes that some of the stuff that he was saying to her was not appropriate. I'm not surprised about that either. But Trump, I could see him as a guy, he knows how to play with your ego, right? Give you compliments and say all kinds of stuff to make you feel good about yourself and get you to keep doing what he wants you to do, right? As long as you play ball, you're good to go. The second you're not, ouch.
It took getting distance. It took educating myself. It took comparing my experience with other horrific experiences of assaults on public servants who were just trying to help this country, to see what a dangerous man he was and what a dangerous con he had sold this country on. But anyway, a year after, I was very much wanting to walk away. I'm an introspective person. I'm a person who can forgive, and I very much wanted to believe that was the course that I needed to take. And this is interesting. This is really interesting. I had decided not to take action. A year later, we're in 2017 now, and Donald Trump was in South Korea, I believe, giving a speech about light shining in the darkness. Now, of course, Anthony, we know Donald Trump doesn't write his own speeches, right? This is one of these great speeches that was written for him, talking about, democracy in America being the light that's shining in darkness. There was a lot of discussion in the news at the time about North Korea and the ominous, just the threat and the darkness and the oppression of a country like North Korea. And I listened to that speech, and it was in conjunction with kind of an identity crisis that I was having, where I thought, okay, I'm going to walk away from this. And it just wasn't feeling right. It was not jiving. That speech that he gave about light shining in darkness, not his heart, but words out of his mouth, was one of the last things that inspired me to act. And that night, I cried so many tears. I woke up in the morning not recognizing myself, because my face was so, this kind of internal wrestling that I had gone through the night before. And I got my computer out. I typed up a complaint. I had outreached to a few lawyers, but it was really too late. It was too late to get a legal team at this point. My 1-year statute of limitations were about to expire on certain claims. Really malpractice on a daily basis. And what an organization like Fox does is they portray the Democrats as evil. Okay, not political opponents, evil. These are evil people who want to destroy this country.
My subscribers know that is basically my assessment as well. I've said this many times. That's what CNN does, that's what MSNBC does, that's what Fox News does. Tim Pool, Blaze TV, Steven Crowder, Ben Shapiro. That's what they do, right? Fausch, Republicans are racist, right? You present the other as evil, not just people that have different opinions or different ideas about how to run the country that you disagree with, No, they're evil, right? That way, when the election shows up, no matter how corrupt the side that you support is, you're going to still support them, because who wants to support evil, right? So interesting that she's pointing out the same thing.
Okay, so first of all, their number one MO is fear mongering. Okay, they are after you. The other people are after you.
Which is, of course, not based in any truth, because it's not Democrats who...
So I want to point out that, again, this is a pattern of behavior I've seen with Americans for some reason. We have this bizarre, out of the frying pan into the fire mentality. You have people that watch CNN, MSNBC, might be on the left, and then start to question things, and then they have this sort of awakening. Then they realize how much they've been lied to, how dishonest liberal media is. So what do? Do they go out and go find some media that has integrity? No, they go out of the frying pan into the fire. They go to right-wing media that is far more dishonest, far more toxic. All the stuff that they ran away from with MSNBC and CNN is there in spades in right-wing media. And I see this pattern of behavior. Here's this woman who's, conservative. She was in the Trump train early on, and she has this awakening. So does she go and seek to be on the side of integrity and honesty? No. She switches one poison for another. Now, I don't know that she's on the left or she's a Democrat. I don't think she is. But she's certainly pushing on a narrative that right-wing media is somehow evil, and doesn't really seem to recognize similar things in left-wing media. So very, very interesting. Duopoly, it's two parties. Not just the Democrats, not just Republicans, right? She fell in with the right, fell in with the Republican Party and Donald Trump, but now she's soft on the Democrats? Right.
Or do mass shootings. It's not Democrats who are out to infringe people's rights. It's so obvious that one is a goodie and one is a baddie when it comes to...
The fact that he describes the two parties as one is a baddie and one is a goodie, that's misinformation. That is misleading. But this is a woman who fell for Trump and his games, fell for the Republican Party and their games. She is not magically, now that she recognizes Trump for what he is, now she's not magically a new person who doesn't have the same handicap, shall we say, that led her to be on the Trump train. So the same way she was deceived and misled and naive following the Trump train, now she's doing the same thing with the liberals.
Intellectualizing their policies. And yet, you're right, there is this ability that right-wing media has. And it's not just Fox. I mean, I sat through all of them yesterday. I have an app that takes me through all of these channels. And I was like, wow, there's like 6 or 7 now of these news channels that are spewing propaganda. And the thing that makes it so compelling is...
100% correct. Just like CNN, MSNBC, David Pakman, Brian Tyler Cohen, just like they do. And frankly, just like the channel that you're on right now, Midas Touch, which is basically a liberal propaganda channel, right? Democrat propaganda channel. And this is the thing, it's insane. You see conservative media talking about liberal media being propaganda, and then you have liberal media saying that conservative media is propaganda. So you have propaganda media calling out propaganda media, and then the propaganda media they're calling out their propaganda. How are the American people supposed to have a sense of reality and what's going on and who to trust and who to listen to when you have such dishonest actors that are doing all this projection and just muddying the waters? And how are normies supposed to process this and understand and interpret what's really going on? Wow.
If you see a story presented on Fox and then you switch AON or to Newsmax, they corroborate the story with different newscasters. And I guess that if you're in that environment, you therefore assume it must be true because more than one channel is talking about it.
Just like when you see liberal media talking about Joe Rogan using horse paste, and then you turn to another liberal channel, they say he's using horse paste, and another liberal channel using horse paste. This is a thing that partisan media does, right? Liberal media is partisan media. That's why they have the partisan prefix of liberal before the media, right? What type of media is it? Partisan liberal media. They're talking about partisan conservative media. What's wrong with conservative media? Why is it so dishonest? Why is it so biased? It's not because it's conservative. It's because it's partisan, like liberal media is partisan, right? Right.
Do you think that conservatives realize that these channels are propaganda channels? Do you think there is a kind of cognitive understanding that, yeah, okay, I'm watching a right-wing...
Yeah, this is kind of tough to listen to. I appreciate her having her awakening and speaking the truth about Trump and the Trump clan, and sharing her perspectives and, how she got caught up in it. But has she really learned anything, right? I mean, admittedly, in my view, she is, in a better tribe or affiliated with or friendly to a better tribe, but it's a duopoly, right? You can't call out Republicans and then be friendly with Democrats. It just doesn't make any sense. This is the Debate Me channel. Debate me in the comment section below. Click on the like button, subscribe, smash that bell. Be well.